We're live.
Welcome to Nurture Our Nature, where we learn about the nature of our mind and learn ways to nurture success through a scientific review of literature. I'm Renee, and I'm here with Daniel. Daniel, how are you today?
Medium well.
Medium well. I'm over easy today.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. We actually are going to continue with our study of music on the mind, a thankfully growing body of literature that I find to be very interesting, not only because I like music, but also because I like to be happy. And it shows that music does a pretty good job of conveying emotion, bringing up emotion, and activating different areas of your mind in order to make you a more functional human being. I like to be a functional human being, even on days like today when I haven't had my coffee bean. But nonetheless, I have listened to some music, and maybe that's enough to get me through.
Yeah, I tell you about the time I did a caffeine detox.
Quite a bit of studies. Yeah, and that's crazy because you are coffee drew and also for working out. You did a lot of pre-workout, you know?
Yeah, so I have, at this point in my life, we are back up to 400 milligrams a day. So that's, I guess, roughly the equivalent of 4 cups of coffee. Now, I find that, yeah, I think you're lagging a little bit there.
Talk to me, Goose. Talk to
All
me,
right.
Goose. I'm here.
You're here?
I'm
Can you
here.
hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Probably a little bit of latency.
I'm ready. Talk to me about your 4
All right.
cups of coffee.
So, I had, in days past, successfully gotten off of my caffeine addiction. That was hard, bro. Like caffeine is legitimately like okay, so the widely like most accepted psychoactive substance by far because everybody just consumes it and they don't think anything about it. Um but we're like writing ourselves essentially like a prescription when you drink caffeine. It's like I want to be more extrovertive. I'm going to write myself a prescription for caffeine. I actually caffeine I think caffeine boosts positive emotion because it pairs with like epinephrine, norepinephrine, all that kicks up alongside dopamine. And so this is throwing me off. Why is this freaking thing? How's that?
It's a little bit
Can you still hear
lower.
me?
It's a lot lower.
Okay. Can you still hear me though?
Yeah, but it's just lower.
How much lower?
Like you went from being up against the mic to like being 2 feet away from the mic.
Mm-hmm. What if we did this?
Turn up for what?
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So I'm going to switch my output here. Audio, mic. We're going to make. Okay, say something.
So
I hear you now.
you were
That's
talking
good.
about, yeah, I hear you good.
Sweet. Now I'm not getting that feedback. Okay, so I'm going to turn on my mic now. How's
Okay,
that?
now it's really loud.
Okay, good. And I'm not getting that weird feedback. That was throwing me off because I was hearing my own voice and it was like echoing, and I was like,
The voices in my head are back.
The voices in my head. The voices in my
okay, how about this?
Dude, you're good. Hit me with it.
Did you hear that?
No, unfortunately, do not hear your soundboard.
Damn it! Okay.
Soundboard TVA.
Yeah. So next time we're gonna get Soundboard on. So
4 cups of
caffeine.
coffee.
4 cups of coffee. Caffeine. 400 milligrams. What is the downside of consuming so much caffeine? If it
One is
boosts,
that you get dependent on it. and then you no
Right.
longer produce those chemicals without it.
Right.
Well, you might still produce them, but not nearly to the extent that you're used to when you drink coffee,
Right.
so that you get the coffee downs.
Doesn't that
You
suck?
get withdrawals.
You get straight up withdrawals when you're not on this. It's a drug. It's a powerful drug, and it makes you feel good.
You know
Like-
what I got withdrawals from this week?
What?
I was drinking like a gallon of water a day. And then over this weekend, it got reduced to like maybe a cup a day. Like I just wasn't drinking enough. And today I
Dang, you
was
drink a
really-
gallon a day, bro?
I try. I've been doing it for a good like 2 weeks or so.
Damn.
And I might not always finish the gallon, but I always fill it up in the morning. By the end of the day, I'm usually at least halfway done with it, at least. And I think my body like really got used to that and appreciated it. That hydration, much needed in my body and brain. And after this weekend, I felt like a little lethargic. Granted, I also didn't have the coffee today, but I think it's because I kind of felt like the need to detox and I didn't know what I was detoxing from. I'm like, it's not like I've been drinking much, you know? I didn't have much coffee this weekend, maybe like 1 cup a day. So I didn't know what I was detoxing from. And then I drank a cup of water and I was like, oh my God, I'm in need of water. I don't need a detox. I need to get back on my water addiction. I felt a lot better. I felt like a sponge.
Well, so much
Felt
of
like a
our
happy,
chemical
goofy
processes
goober.
depend on the presence of water in the body. Like every chemical reaction taking place in your body, like all of your metabolism is dependent on the presence of water. So if you're lacking that substance, then your overall metabolism will slow down. Additionally, like your ability to eliminate waste products from literally every chemical reaction. So you walking, you breathing, you digesting food, all that stuff produces waste products. And increasing water intake, like some studies have said up to like 20% increases in overall metabolism can occur if you up your water intake because of how efficient that allows you to run, because of every chemical reaction being dependent on the presence of water.
Yeah, which is funny because a lot of people think, oh, if you drink a lot of water, you lose weight because you're more full, so you're not eating as much food. But I found that I was
It
eating
boosts
just
metabolism.
as much.
Yeah, it boosts metabolism.
Yeah.
That's the kicker. It's not that it makes you full. It's that metabolism actually goes up because metabolism is dependent on the presence of water. And what is metabolism but the summation of every single chemical reaction taking place in your body? That's what metabolism is. So people that have a slow metabolism usually end up becoming overweight. But for them to understand what metabolism is, it's just the rate of chemical reactions taking place in your body.
Yeah, and it's not like, oh, you just need liquid. Because, I see a lot of people just drinking their soda. It's like, bro, that's tricking your mind into thinking you're satisfying your thirst for water. It's not actually improving anything. And it is, in fact, giving you a overdose of sugar. But that's another subject.
Right. Yeah. And one more thing on that topic. Artificial sweeteners have been suggested, like the artificial sweeteners found in soda, to still stimulate an insulin response. Like when you have the presence of like a sucralose or maybe even stevia, which stevia is like pretty neutral as a compound when it's broken down. It doesn't really have, as far as I've read up on, too many negative side effects. Sucralose, though, has like a lot of byproducts that are harmful for the body. It disrupts. Thank you. Do you see that in the chat? That's
No. Go on. I didn't see it, though.
We got a spammer.
Oh, dude, we're getting spammed. Nice. Please do not click on the link.
Should I click on the link?
No, please don't.
Block user. I just blocked them.
It just opened. It opens in our live.
Dude, but the best part is it didn't even contribute to our live. like live viewers. It was just
Yeah, 'cause
zero
it's just
viewers, and then
really, it's a bot that doesn't even count as a view.
and it's funny that it's always that topic that tends to be spammed. Why isn't it anything else like, let's fix your windows for a discounted price? Instead, it's that.
It's because you can access it on the internet.
Yeah.
And because it's highly addictive.
These is facts. Anything that is central to furthering our species is highly addictive. Food can be.
Speaking of which, I hope you stayed strong. We're getting through November.
Yeah.
It's December
actually.
next week or something.
I would say on that front, I mean, save for having a girlfriend that ruined a freaking like almost 90-day streak. We were doing good.
I'm sure you were pretty grateful in the moment.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe not, because I could use that energy to create other things.
Hey, sometimes you could just engage without actually, reaching that
dude,
low testosterone point.
That's 99% of the time. It's 99% where it's like, nah, I'm gonna take care of you. You don't worry about me. Don't worry about me, because I need to save this energy to create other things. Essential self-improvement tenet is, for those of you that aren't familiar, become a part of the Nofap community. It's good for you.
Yeah, I think society is overstimulated and overnormalized, but we could definitely go on a rant about that too.
Yeah, that would be. I mean, that's actually. It's kind of clickbaity at this point, because it started off as a small Reddit group, and it's kind of expanded to be kind of like clickbaity, because it's like just like the word dopamine. It's like one of those things that's become mainstream.
Well, I'm glad that people are at least becoming aware of the consequences of overstimulating your mind. And I think that we were all in a point, especially during lockdowns, that made us especially vulnerable. And, whether it be through boredom or simply through access to resources on our computer, which is like the only form of socialization we had for some time.
Right.
And some people went down the rabbit hole, and for many reasons, including that, I think lockdowns have increased the depression and anxiety rate in our population, especially our younger generations. But I'm sure it affects everybody. But statistically, what I've read, the younger generations have been specifically impacted based on the studies that I've read.
Well, we're still developing. Like, the younger population hasn't formulated opinions on what it is to be an adult, what life means. Like, as a younger kid, like, you're still trying to figure out your opinions on the world. You haven't, like, it's funny because your mind as a younger individual, you're more neuroplastic, meaning you're more likely to form memories, you're more likely to form skill sets, you're more likely to form like different even opinions on things. And it's funny because as you age, you become less
Habits.
neuroplastic, and that, yeah, new habits. You're more likely, like as you get older, to be less flexible with your opinions. And is there a correlation? Maybe this is all speculation right here, but maybe there's a correlation between neuroplasticity and your ability to switch opinions. Because as you age, as far as I've seen, most older individuals seem to have some idea in their head of how the world works, and then they kind of stick to that. So is that correlated with less neuroplasticity? Maybe that's the explanation for it, but I'm sure it's a multifaceted thing.
And the last time we were talking about the prefrontal cortex and its role in developing our personality and our form of functioning in the day-to-day. And it's not just depression and anxiety that these lockdowns have induced, but also a inefficiency in your prefrontal cortex ability to make connections, bilateral connections in the brain, and which reduced overall PFC function, which I think goes hand in hand with those mental disorders that are becoming, unfortunately, very prevalent. And thankfully, some of the research I was reading up on with music was actually, sadly, it was done in 2022 on a group in China that is still under lockdown due to outbreaks. The article was called Effects of Long-Term C19, if you will, confinement and music
Nice.
stimulation on mental state and brain activity of young people by Lina Liu et al. And it showed that 80% of the young people represented decreased function due to mood disorders and anxiety disorders correlated with the lockdowns. And these spiked tremendously after 20, 30, 40 days, exponentially. Which makes sense, but this is just a 30, 40-day study. I think the longest period that was measured here was 40 days. But obviously we were under lockdown for almost, it felt like a whole year, wasn't it?
Yeah. That's crazy.
And that impact was permanent on many of the kids that were still developing, unaware of ways to escape and develop their mind, instead confined to the technology that they were already so dependent on and being fed overstimulating media from all sorts of websites. I mean, the fear combined with the constant distractions, I really don't blame them. I feel for them. And I mean, we're not exempt from that ourselves, you and I, but at least I think we had some self-awareness on our desire to improve and to meditate and to continue to grow our minds despite the unfortunate lockdown circumstances that we were impacted by. And something that you've actually mentioned before is FNIRS, or otherwise known as functional near-infrared spectroscopy. It's similar to the fMRI that we've talked about, where it measures changes in oxyhemoglobin in the mind, in the blood vessels of the mind. In other words, measuring the oxygen transitions and the activity level of different regions of the brain based on the hemoglobin, deoxyhemoglobin and oxyhemoglobin at different sections over time. And I'm really grateful this study went into it using this form of technology, because it's very easy to measure, especially when they introduced music to these depressed individuals in lockdown. And you don't have to be a professional meditator to listen to music. You could find ways to improve yourself, your mood, with simply listening to something enjoyable. As per this study, it did show an important role in emotion and cognitive tasks, in processing and other executive functions in the prefrontal cortex that were improved when the individuals partaked in listening to music. Do you think that listening to music when studying is necessarily a good thing given this mood increase? Do you think it's something that should be played all the time, every day, or is this something like you can also OD on, like coffee? Something that might overstimulate you? What do you think is the balance is between being in isolation and depression and using music as an escape?
So music, it has to be tapered. I think music can be formatted to fit your needs. If you're going to use it for studying, I haven't read specifics, I guess, on what would be most beneficial for studying. What I have read up on is the different brainwave states. And if I am attempting to study, I might try and find like some kind of brainwave background that would be beneficial to stimulate my brain's function. So we have all these different brainwaves from alpha, beta, gamma, theta, delta, all these different brainwaves. You can use these to your advantage. So if I wanted to play music, or let's say brainwave sounds to get my brain into that state. So we know beta waves are associated with wakefulness and like you during activity. Maybe what I would do is play something that simulates beta wave movement in the background while I'm studying. So if I can, through brainwave sounds, stimulate my brain to act in a beta wave type of mode, which if we know that beta waves are associated with wakefulness and attentiveness and moving around and being sharp and alert, if that's the case, then perhaps while I'm studying, I'll play beta waves to keep myself alert and focused and attentive.
You've also mentioned how music is processed primarily in the right hemisphere, where the creative brain is, whereas the left, more logical side is used more when engaging in studies. I wonder if playing music, whether it be studying or doing anything that you are trying to improve on, helps activate more parts of the brain simultaneously, making the activity more engaging and also enhancing memory of the tasks at hand.
Yeah. So fMRI imaging shows a lot of different things on that. So all of your reward centers are triggered when you listen to music. Ventral tegmental area, the striatum, nucleus accumbens, like all of that gets activated. So that's like those are the reward centers. And so if that's the case, we know that listening to music is a deeply intrinsically rewarding activity. Welcome back. And it's so if that is the case, maybe playing background music can enhance, as you were suggesting, the activity of studying. If the activity of studying isn't already stimulating enough for you, and why might that be the case? Well, perhaps your threshold for excitement needs to be readjusted. And how can you do that? You cut out the things that are more exciting. And they are getting more literature to support this claim. The idea of a dopamine detox is actually starting to, Dr. Anna Lemke is starting to add to that body of literature. And it's really interesting because we're starting to understand better how motivation works neurochemically and through different psychological like analyses. We're starting to understand better that if you participate regularly in highly stimulating activities, the less stimulating activities will no longer be important. I'm always having to tie that idea back into what we're talking about because I think that's central. That's such a central concept to understand. But I was just throwing that out there because we're talking about how music can stimulate reward centers and all the different regions of the brain that it activates. So you were talking a little bit about how music activates the more frontal regions of the brain. Have you ever heard of hypofrontality?
No, I actually haven't heard of hypofrontality. Please explain.
So hypofrontality occurs after you binge on highly stimulating activities.
Unbalancing the
Hypofrontality,
homeostasis, huh?
right. Hypofrontality essentially means hypo meaning low function of the frontal areas of your brain. So hypofrontality. So what are the
Mm.
frontal areas of your brain responsible for? Executive functioning, decision making, advanced planning, all of that stuff goes right out the window. So what is it? What is it about participating in these super stimulating activities that shuts down the frontal regions? It's almost like, so all your reward centers are deeper in the brain. So nucleus accumbens, ventral striatum area, all that stuff, that's like deeper in the brain. So it's almost like your brain just activates that and it preferentially biases the activation towards those regions when it has the opportunity to. So I think I think what I'm getting at with that is if music successfully circumvents like circumvents that issue. Let's say you've just got done binging. Can you use music to fix hypofrontality? That would be a nice idea for like a research design. So somebody who's just finished binging or gone on like a very long period of time where let's say they've been addicted to drugs or whatever, all these individuals have experienced hypofrontality. If that's the case, can music successfully be used as an intervention to reduce the presence of the lack of activation of the front of our minds? And I'm sure that would be a question for individuals who are in research within the realm of music therapy, because a lot of music therapy is aimed at psychological disturbances.
Well, I mean, in the research I was talking about, which people were depressed and had mood disorders, and it even showed there was a decrease in academic performance and sleep disturbances. This could also all be symptoms of someone with hypofrontality.
Right.
And in this article, it showed that listening to music helped possibly reduce the inhibition of the corpus callosum and allowed them to enhance processing efficiency between the hemispheres. So the music itself kind of helped allow to have some fluidity of neural connectivity in the mind in people who were stunted due to their circumstances. And in the examples that you mentioned, these are some self-inflicted circumstances versus in this research, it was the lockdown mandated circumstances. But nonetheless, the state of mind that these individuals were impacted by was affecting their other areas of life. And simply playing music, and I think in this one they used music without lyrics, but it did increase the functional connectivity between some of the channels on the
And
hemispheres.
and right. And just to add to what you're saying there, the corpus callosum is a like huge like connection between the left and right hemispheres. It's a series of like white matter. So we know in the brain what white matter serves to do. White matter is fibers that travel from point A to point B. White matter serves to connect different regions of the brain versus gray matter, which contains a lot of cell bodies. So just to kind of like add to what you're saying there a little bit, if there is the presence of like decreased activity of the corpus callosum, that says a lot. That means that like our logical and our creative aspects are not connecting as much. And it seems to be that like having both of those aspects in life is extremely important because one allows for flexibility while the other allows for more analytical reasoning. You kind of need both.
So I wonder if something like music is able to help promote that connectivity.
I think it can. And why is that? Especially, especially for those participating in the production of music. I mean, I'm sure listening to music can do the same thing, but those participating in the production of music, if you think about it, like you are creating sounds, and logically you're having to, like, in some sense mathematically figure out like
Go from the sound to the
this,
language to the math, you know?
right? So there's a lot going on there. um so I wouldn't doubt that listening to music and performing music allow for increased activity in the corpus callosum. And is it possible that listening to music can increase creativity? I also wonder that. So for those who claim themselves as more left-minded individuals, and for those just joining us, left-mindedness is more associated with analytical, logical, mathematical reasoning versus right-sided, which has been hypothesized to be more akin to those that are creative. It's the region of the brain that's associated with more abstract ideas. So I wonder if that's a potential like area for research. And this is why this talking about this area is so fun, because there's such like there's so much that you can do with it. There's so many questions that we could ask that haven't actually been like researched yet. Um, and that's a question that I would ask, does listening to music increase creativity? And is that something that can be measured? We can maybe use the big five personality traits, bringing in openness. If I listen to more music, do I display an increase in trait openness? We know that trait openness is basically associated with creativity. It's associated with your desire to pursue different kinds of ideas. It's associated with creation of art. Um, so I'm wondering, the individuals that listen to music, are they more likely to be creative? And I was talking to you like pre-show about some of the findings that they've seen in musicians. Musicians, as I was saying earlier, they display increased levels of cyclothymia and bipolar disorder. So there are some measurable differences that we'll see in people who spend more time around music.
Did you say that it increased in bipolar?
Increase in the incidence of bipolar and cyclothymia. Cyclothymia is basically a less severe form of bipolar disorder, and that's
Wow.
basically your propensity to experience periods of mania, so periods where you're feeling on top of the world and you can do anything. You have so much positive emotion, so many like you're in a neurochemical state that allows you to feel like you can just do anything. And then the opposite end of bipolar disorders, the more depressive episodes where you have no motivation, you don't feel pleasure from anything. So bipolar disorder essentially, I would say, takes what the average person feels in life, because neurochemically you tend to fluctuate as an individual throughout the day. You fluctuate, motivation states fluctuate throughout the day. When you wake up, you have more cortisol, you have more wakefulness hormones, you have more like adenosine starts to build up, you have more dopamine, you have a lot more at your disposal, versus at the end of the day you have a lot less of that stuff available to you. So and then even there's like, even throughout the day, around lunchtime, around like 12, 1 o'clock, you get that dip. So motivation states throughout the day actually change. So individuals with bipolar disorder, cyclothymia, they experience that same exact set of changes, but to a much more severe degree. It's
Now,
like,
I'm also sure that it's not consistent day to day, but more so week to month, where they'll have mania for a large period of time, where they'll feel higher highs and the lows won't be as low. And then when they're on the other end of the polar emotional roller coaster that it is, they have deeper dips and
right,
their highs are not nearly as high.
exactly. Yep. So it really depends on the individual.
Now, it's interesting because we were talking about before how music has a big impact on communicating emotion. And you were just saying how a lot of people that are artists that create music have these quite drastic tendencies that can develop in their mind due to the condition of possibly being exposed to much. If their submersion into almost overwhelms the mind to an extent where it makes you fluent in the emotion, but also makes those emotions more severe in the person experiencing them. Just food for thought.
Yeah. You cut out for some of that.
Oh no. Well, essentially just discussing the potential good that music has, but also the potential severity on the mind that artists have when they are submerged in the act of creating music. I wonder if it's because they strengthen that right hemisphere so much they get to a point where that form of thinking begins to dictate the homeostatic balance of their emotional states.
Damn, that's huge. Yeah, because the suggestion has been that individuals are left or right brained. So, yes, musicians are more likely to activate that right hemisphere, maybe to, let's say, consult with their frontal regions of their brain. So when they're planning and making decisions, they are more likely to rely on that more creative, like abstract thinking when they are looking to make a major decision in their life versus a left brain person. So I wonder what that looks like. And I wonder, like in my own life, I think me personally, I might be more right brained. Um, I definitely like I personally enjoy taking an ideal, and I think I'm ruled by ideals. Um, and it may not be the most realistic application to the execution of anything, but I like to picture something in its most perfect form, and then when I make my decisions, it's based off of like the most the most perfect ideal that I can think of, which may not be more on the left side of the brain, which is like each step leading up to it. But I might be a classic right brain person because I also just when I think about different things, I don't care about the steps leading up to it. Like when people talk to me about, but like how are you gonna, let's say when I'm talking about my dreams as a physical therapist, so how are you going to, you know, open up your own clinic and use psychotherapy and elements of music therapy within that? And I'm like, and then they start asking me like, so how are you going to pay for the overhead cost, and how are you going to like all this other like, I'm like, dude, I don't care about that stuff. Like, I know it's going to happen, I know it's going to work out. It's like, why am I going to waste time thinking about those details when I could develop an idea that could ultimately help so many people out? Like that to me sounds so much more interesting than me talking to you about, oh well, this is the profit margin that I need to make in order to sustain myself as an individual. And I'm like, I don't give a shit about that.
But much much
Dude,
like your mind, you need both.
you do need both. But to me, it's just like it's like the way that my mind works, it's like I understand that these things are like necessary, and I understand that you have to keep your business afloat, and you have to have the math make positive numbers so your building doesn't go under, and you have to be able to like get your name out there for sales and stuff. Like I get that. I really do, but it's just it's like why would I want to waste my time talking and thinking about that stuff? It's like to me it feels like a waste when I could spend my creative energy like working towards an ideal that could ultimately benefit people outside of myself. But that's a very classic, at least in my opinion. I feel like I might be a very classic right-minded person because I don't care about logistics. I really don't. And who knows? Who knows? Maybe that's a nature nurture thing. Maybe that's just the environment that I was brought up in, where I was always told to consider, like, you need to consider the math, and you need to think about all this stuff. And I'm just like, nah,
Logistics.
screw that. I don't care about logistics. I'm a right brain guy now because it's funny how, at least in my life experience too, stuff always just seems to work out. It's just like, okay, yeah, I need to get this score to get into PT school, but like, why am I going to sit there and stress about it? It's like, I'm just going to study and do the best that I can, and somehow it'll all work out. It's like, why would I sit there and waste my effort counting numbers and looking at graphs and sheets and all this stuff when somehow I can maximize I think my ideal, bro. Oh, I'm getting real personal today. Ladies and gentlemen, you're getting to know Daniel today. This is Daniel happy hour. Holy poopy. This is funny. I feel like I enjoy like setting an ideal and then trying to make that ideal come true without like without having logistics be a constraint.
But
Because
you also forget that one of the benefits of teamwork is that it allows you to engage with your mind the way that you see more natural, more beneficial, but also contribute to a greater good in a way that others, maybe more left brain individuals, can provide the logistical perspective towards the same goal nonetheless. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It's just, if anything, you're self aware of the skill tree that you prefer to develop per your nature, as you said. And although you still have the capacity and the potential to nurture the left side of your endeavors and of your mind itself, being a part of a team allows you to not only learn from others, but also allow them to contribute the same way you do to the same cause, but through their own left brain approach. Which is why most businesses are more than just one person. Because much like the communication between left and right brain is important in our own mind in order for day-to-day function, but that's also important on a grander scale interpersonally, because some of the greatest strengths are maybe those that are specialized in either or. Granted, there might be some fields that are predominantly one or other, but even in those fields, I guarantee you, there are individual members that share a counter form of thinking to the rest of their field. And without them, the field would not be able to progress. Take engineers, for example, who undoubtedly are much more left brain, but nonetheless, there are designers in that engineering field doing things that aren't so logical when they're first sketching it on paper, but more so more emotional, to have a deeper meaning, maybe through art or through the construction of designs that bring people together. Even in the music field, you got more people on the right side brain, but then you have musical engineers that are designing the studio in order to enhance the audio quality. And they're able to do so in their logistical left brain manner. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. that you think the way you do. And I don't think you think it's a bad thing either. Simply having that self-awareness might give you the strength to specialize, but also the capacity to develop your left brain through practice and also through teamwork. And as we know now, also maybe music while you do your tasks will help bleed the connections between them.
I think the challenge with being an idealist, creative, one of them is finding, at least in a teamwork situation, trust. To trust that the people that you're working with aren't going to be selfish. Um, I, I might have a negative outlook on this, but I find in some regards a lot of business, like when it comes to like me envisioning in my future developing my own physical therapy business with a unique like ideal in mind to treat the mind and the body holistic as one unit. I I worry, I really do that it's going to end up, and I've seen it so many times, like some giant franchise where some other person takes over and they're going to come under the guise of, yes, this is teamwork, but then they're going to turn it into like some like run of the mill, like it loses.
It becomes more of a mechanized corporate group.
Yeah, very businessy, and that's
focused on profit versus
exactly, and that's a
betterment of
very
the patient.
left-sided thing. Left-sided people are much better at making money. They're much better at like I don't want to say like manipulating more creative-minded people. Creative-minded people, they're probably not going to make as much money as a left-sided person because left-sided people are more concerned with that sort of thing. But it's all about like what fulfills you as an individual. I mean, for some people, making more money is their highest ideal. And like me personally, I cannot relate to that. I am abhorred when I hear that. I get angry and I'm like, well, why? What is it that you're going to do with that as you collect more and more of this material wealth? Like, what are you going to do? Like, is there something more that you're going to offer this world as you collect your material wealth? Is there something that is going to make humanity better as you do this? So very idealistic. I recognize it. I do. And so I'm very challenging with people. And I don't challenge people out loud. Like I have to, at least at this stage in my life while I'm still a student in PT school, like I'm just watching behind the scenes very silently. I have to observe how like all these other clinicians that I'm working under in like this medical system, I'm watching other doctors, I'm watching other healthcare professionals, how they run their businesses. And maybe I'm just a product of the culture where I see so many of these people who are very money driven and who don't have a deeper ideal in mind, where it's not patient centered anymore. It's very like it's a money mill. And like you keep these patients coming in and you keep making your money. And that hurts my heart. And it's turned me into this like stone cold guy when it comes to like having a discussion on the business end of things, where I don't want to discuss business with you. No, I want to discuss patient outcomes. I want to see people get better. I don't want to discuss the business end of the medical system. It pisses me off. And like
Yeah, but
I don't care
it's
about
undoubtedly
profits.
necessary because if
It
you
is
don't have
necessary.
profits, then you won't have the resources to treat the patients. So it's a cyclic problem that if you don't treat both aspects, you won't be able to help them to begin with.
Yeah.
Many times, the people in your profession, they also have office managers that are in charge of the financial side of the business, leaving you to operate solely as a PT specialist who can dedicate all your time on your patients and also furthering your education to better them, while the financial advisor or the office manager is able to make sure the numbers are adding up correctly, with that said, you definitely should still be educated because it's possible that, like you said, you join forces and it's someone that maybe you shouldn't have trusted. And because you're not literate on the left side logical of the business, they can take advantage of you, much the same way you had mentioned before. So it definitely is possible, but it has to be with someone who shares your goal for success and for the betterment of the community that you treat.
Right. And I think that's like as with all relationships, you have to do some vetting. You have to spend time like seeing what are this person's values? Like what we ultimately orient ourselves in relation to like our highest set of ideals. Okay? So I'm going to arrange my life if I have a belief in God and let's say that everything I believe in, if it's Christianity, where you believe that, you know, love thy neighbor as you love yourself, and you make that your highest ideal, you're going to live that out. You're going to arrange your life in that fashion. And the same thing goes for any other relationship. If you once you get to know people, see what their ideals are, and that ultimately determines how they're going to lay out their life. And you can determine from that, is this somebody that I'd want to work with? Is this somebody that I'd want to, let's say, have a romantic relationship with? Ultimately, you can determine a lot from that sort of thing. And if I'm going to be a business partner with somebody, I'm going to want to ask those like core belief questions. And if you don't have core beliefs, well, that's going to be very difficult because the ultimate beliefs of the society that you're in are going to dominate you if you don't make your own ideas. Like if you don't make your own beliefs, then everything that's being thrown around in the mainstream media, that's ultimately what's going to determine the direction of your life if you don't ask enough questions and deconstruct things a little bit. So yeah, we go we go deep on some of this stuff. Like I just you asked me like one question, I'm just like I'm going, bro.
Hey, it's on your
Uh,
mind, you know.
oh no, it's
That's half the
fresh on my
reason why
mind.
we do this is to, although we want to share a lot and educate the people, a lot of this is us discovering our own nature, and that way, with that self-awareness, be able to nurture ourselves for success through the research that we discover.
Right.
But it's hard to apply tools if you don't know the problem or if you don't know the field you're working in. So, much of this discussion being your perspective, it's fantastic because it shows exactly the power that self-awareness has in aligning you with your goals and also your approach today and in the future in your business as you proposed. I wish we could have some FNIRS or functional MRI or functional, what was that, EEG. I would love to do those kind of tests on ourselves during different tasks. Although our sample size is two as of right now,
We'll turn
I
into a
think it'd be
case
great
study.
to, yeah, it'd be great to see the differences, whether it be through with meditation and management of different habits and behaviors and with music. I'm sure there's a lot we can learn about ourselves and use that experience to help further our discussion here on the podcast. Speaking of which, I also like to, other than the technology that I want to incorporate in our experiences, I would love to get some guests on here that are possibly specialists within their field. I know you and I both have some communications with people in PT and music and other medical fields and research even. And I'd love to hear what the guests' perspectives are and doing the same thing that you did, but on their experiences and how they used what they've learned in order to further develop themselves. I think that would be an incredible, incredible discussion to be had.
Yeah, we can get quite a few people on here, I think. If you got a platform.
We can click that link in the comment section. I'm sure we can get a few people in here.
Oh yeah. That'll do it.
Next time, you gotta have that soundboard activated, man.
I'm
I
salty.
want to
that
be
doesn't work.
interrupted by some Chad music, you know?
I'm salty. Like I'm pressing the button right now, and you
You know,
can't
who
hear
knows?
it.
Maybe if you hear it on your end, it's possible that when we listen to this podcast back, it's actually just blaring on your side.
Oh, it might be. It might be. I'm pressing it a bunch of times right now. So 5541. That's a place where I'm gonna check.
There we go.
Next, when I do the playback, I see if there's fart noises.
Thank you for this
yeah.
discussion, as always.
Yes, sir.
Next time, I hope to discuss about the emotion that music can bring about. And also, if you want to do a topic change and incorporate what we know so far into maybe more neurological analysis of the mind, that would also be quite exciting because you have a great foundation for understanding the neurochemistry and the association between the functions that we execute with our behavior and how they correlate to the different regions of the mind. And what better way to understand our nature than to understand the computing mechanism between our ears? Am I right?
All right. That sounds good to me, bro.
How do you feel?
Let's see. I mean, I got a lot of leftover stuff here that I didn't
I
even
know,
cover.
man. I know you got a lot of content. I was really excited to get into it today.
Yeah.
Do you think you can? Or let's not rush it.
Yeah, it's not Russia, but I'll throw something out there.
Do it. I got my glove
okay.
on.
Bet.
Catcher's bit.
All right. So music therapy, there is a good bit of evidence on music therapy for the treatment of depression and mood disorders. Neuropsychiatric disorders, autism spectrum disorders, all that stuff. You can use music therapy to intervene. And again, the mechanism of action for that is kind of up for debate. But it might be that music successfully sets a new context for individuals with negative affect. So individuals who are in a state of depression, a state of decreased positive emotion, playing music may successfully bring them out of that. And as you just discussed, we know that it increases the amount of blood flow to regions of the brain that increase feel-good chemicals, that increase motivation state. So music may be an effective intervention for depressive episodes as well as anxiety episodes. So if you're experiencing too much of that wakefulness out of hormones, too much epinephrine, too much norepinephrine, your vital signs are all going up. So elevated heart rate, elevated blood pressure, all that stuff's going up. Music may potentially be able to bring that down too. So specifically, the intervention could be that you play music with a lower BPM. So if my heart rate is currently 130 BPMs, which is elevated, and I'm stressed out and I'm in an anxious state, playing music that's beating at like 50, 60, 70 BPMs, that may successfully bring down an individual's heart rate who's experiencing an anxiety episode. So music as an intervention is cheap and readily available. What a tool, right? It's cheap and readily available. It doesn't require any prescription. I mean, now music therapists can write your prescription.
The BPM is specialized.
It can be, yes.
That's fantastic.
And music therapists
that's quite
know
measurable.
best.
It's not just like, oh, this music is this genre, or this music is a feel good song. It's like the BPM itself is correlated with that
Right. And
beneficial.
your heart beats in beats per minute. So the two, it's like the same mathematical value, BPMs, so beats per minute. Music occurs in beats per minute, and your heart beats in beats per minute. So like you can potentially impact heart rate that way. So it's really cool, especially if the individual becomes mindful and they engage the front aspect of their mind. So using prefrontal cortex, using advanced executive function to focus on the BPMs of that piece of music, you can successfully potentially modulate some of those anxiety-based symptoms.
Have you sent me this article?
I have not.
Please do, because the next time I want to go in depth, and I think if we both cover the same article, there's no way we can possibly get off track with with our discussion. It would be just an in-depth review of that one.
Oh, but it was purposeful getting off track today.
Oh, I have no problem with it.
It was
This is
very
not
purposeful.
this is not me saying I don't like getting. Yeah, I don't. Trust me. Listen, there were times where I was like, I could bring him back onto the rails, or I could just let this go. And I was like, I like this where this is going. Let's go. This is what you call a little audible right there.
I took you right into the depths of the medical system while also talking about music therapy and left versus right brained, and my mic just fell.
Discussing different ways music makes you feel good.
Yep. There you go. Get back
Improvised
on there.
soundboard there. Yeah, no, that really was a great insight on your perspective, and especially because the topic we were discussing was how musicians themselves have a different outlook due to their developmental music perspective, and you are in fact a music specialist in Spanish guitar,
Classical guitar.
thanks to your your major in classical guitar. What did I say? Did I not say classical? Oh, I said
You said
Spanish.
Spanish. I mean, I can play Spanish
Okay.
guitar or flamenco guitar, but it's not 100% my focus. I mean, classical guitar is like, I guess, the more broader term to describe
That's
that
your
sort of
jam.
thing. But we can call it because I have to go to bed in 28 minutes.
I respect that. I respect that. I'm probably gonna do some laundry and stay up for like another hour or two.
Hell yeah.
Yes, sir. All right, brother. Until next time here on Nurturing Our Nature, this is
I'm
Renee and
pressing the
Daniel
button.
signing off.
Cheers.